Well, hello there and good morning, happy campers. It's one of those mornings where I am just not feeling high energy. I'm not feeling like I'm awake or alert enough to say I'm up, and yet I am. But no worries, I come to my coffee break to gab at you with a cup of coffee, so maybe that'll help as I tell a story to you today. I was thinking about a time back in my childhood when I lived on the outskirts of Billings, Missouri. And we lived in a trailer on a lot that kind of sat in a little sunk-in area off the highway where I think there was at least another trailer, maybe two, on the property. But there was a lot of land, and there were some things I remember specifically about that location because we lived in several locations in and around Billings, Missouri, which is a very small town. There was a sinkhole out in the middle of this field. I remember several stories from living in that location, and I'll tell you a couple of small ones before I get to the big story, just because I want to make sure I tell you all the things I've been remembering about this location where I lived as a child. And I don't remember how old I was at that time. I was old enough to get on the school bus and go to school, so, it must have been, oh gosh, maybe 5th or 6th grade. Anyway, you get the idea. I was young. And in Billings, Missouri, there isn't much to do out there, so it really is sort of a farming type community, I think. I don't know if it's still that way today, but back then it was. But we lived in this little trailer because we lived in a lot of trailers growing up. And it was off the highway, and across the street was a tavern, which used to be run by my aunt and uncle, and then my mother took it over, and so we lived across the street from her work, basically. So if I needed something, I could go across the street to the tavern and talk to her about it. But basically, I was close enough to keep an eye on me, I suppose, and vice versa. But I remember things about that location, and some things I remember about the tavern specifically was that we used to have turkey shoots there. So I remember shooting shotguns and trying to hit the target for the turkey shoot. And I've never been much of a gun person at all. Listen, I'll support people's rights to have a gun, but at the same time, your right to bear arms has a certain amount of limitation to it, I think, because guns are solely made to kill, and that's all there is to it. And I don't want to get into a big heated discussion about the pros and cons of gun ownership or who should have it or whatever, but that's not my point of my story today. I have had experience with guns because of that turkey shoot. I used to go, I remember during that same general time period going squirrel hunting and rabbit hunting with 22s, and I remember BB guns, and my mom had a small handgun. So, guns were around. And that's going to be a big part of my big story here in a minute. But I remember the turkey shoot at the tavern. I remember, a one-woman band at the tavern, and thought that was kind of fun, having a musician, a very creative person around to watch. And I don't know why. I guess because my mom owned the bar, I was able to go into the bar and not get into trouble for doing that, for being a youngin', and at the bar, Mom would make some kind of bar snack made out of hot dogs and hot sauce and beer. I forget what we used to call those, but I remember that and the peanuts and snacking on those things over at the tavern. But that's across the street. Back over in the trailer house, I used to go out and try to play in the sinkhole. And I remember loving to go out there and play in the storms. I was that kind of child. If a storm would kick up, the wind would blow, the rain clouds would come, and I would want to go outside and play. And I also remember a tree out there that was pretty big, and that tree served to be the kind of tree that your parents would say, you know what, you're in trouble. So why don't you go out there to that tree and you cut your own switch because you're going to get a whooping. And that was more punishment, I think, than the actual whooping, is going and getting your own switch. And another little part of the story of that area that we lived in that specific location that I remember is that I don't know who lived next door to us in the other trailer. It wasn't right up on us, it wasn't super close, but it wasn't too far away either. So you could go and you could borrow a cup of sugar very easily from the neighbor. But I remember my mother going over to that particular trailer, and for some reason one afternoon they were over there drinking beer. I guess they had Miller beers, at that time was very popular. And I remember going over there that afternoon when they were having their good time or just visiting over a beer. I don't remember what it was. And I was given at that time what they called little pony beers. They're a really tiny bottle of beer, and they're just a small one, and they were in little glass bottles, and they were pony beers is what they called them. She gave me that. As I recall, I think she gave me that just because she wanted to wear me down and make me go to sleep, take a nap. And my mother was the type of person that if you were going to do that kind of thing, if you're going to have a beer, if you're going to go ahead and try to be a full-grown adult as a child, and you wanted to drink a beer, you wanted to smoke a cigarette, you should do it right in front of her. So in this case, I think she encouraged it, but I did drink a little bit of the Miller beer. And to tag on to that story based on, my mom saying, "Yay, you're going to do it, you need to do it in front of me." I remember also a lot younger, back in South Carolina, being at a bowling alley and finding a lit cigarette in some ashtray in one of the seats back in the back end of the bowling alley, and I was sneaking in and trying to take a puff of that cigarette and got caught. And my punishment for that was to sit in the middle of the kitchen on a stool, and she would hand me a cigarette, one of her cigarettes, because she smoked, and it was a Salem menthol cigarette. And she would light it up, and she said, "You want to smoke? Go ahead, smoke. You're going to do it in front of me." And I got sicker than a dog doing that. So I never smoked again, really. I mean, other than having to fake smoke here and there, or, you think you're going to try it, and then you're like, "Nah, I really don't like that." But anyways, those are some of my memories about this particular location in Billings, Missouri, where we lived. All those memories are coming back to me from that particular location. But it leads to the one big story I want to tell you about coming home from school one day and being all alone at the trailer house. And we had, like I said earlier, I remember guns being around the house. So there was a shotgun in the house standing up in the corner, and I was told that I was not supposed to touch the shotgun when nobody else was around. Without permission, you're not supposed to touch the gun. And but there it was, and there I was, and I was all alone. And that gun was just sitting in that corner, just glistening with sweat, waiting for me to come over and touch it. And I don't know what came over me. This happens to me sometimes, and I'll say this to you from time to time. Sometimes things fly out of my mouth, and they're witty, and they're funny, or they're just out of the ordinary, and I don't know where they come from, but I say they fly out of me like a demon. Well, sometimes I just suddenly do something unpredictable like this. But I went ahead and I picked up that gun, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to do it. Nobody was there but me. And that's when I found out what a hair trigger was. Because the gun went off and it was loaded. And it butted up against me and threw me up against the wood paneling of the living room and flew out of my hand. And of course, because it went off and because it was loaded, it did cause some damage. So what happened was I shot up the entire middle of the kitchen floor to smithereens. It was linoleum, so definitely when you get a full-blown shotgun going off and all those pellets just destroyed that kitchen floor. Ooh, I was scared to pieces. Oh my goodness. I didn't know what to do. But I knew Mom was across the street at the tavern. And I knew I had to tell her. There was no hiding the fact that there was a hole in the kitchen floor. So I went across the highway and kind of snuggled up to the side of the tavern, and I didn't go in right away. I just sort of kind of edged around the entire tavern and decided, oh, I'm not going to go in and tell her just yet. No, I'm not going to do it. And I went into the bathrooms, which were on the outside of the tavern. And I was going to open up the bathroom door to go inside and just be there for a minute and hide out. But when I opened the door, there was my mom's boyfriend sitting on the pot doing his business. And he was a police officer at the time. So I thought, oh, I'm in serious trouble because there's the cop. And I opened that door, saw him, and slammed it shut. It was pretty funny when I think about it. But eventually I did make it into the bar, and I had to tell her. And quite honestly, my memory from what actually happened from that moment to the next, I don't remember clearly. I mean, we were in a public place, so not a lot could happen at that moment in time. But I do remember all that leading up to that moment, not being so scared to tell her that I touched the gun, I picked up the gun, I shot a hole in the floor in the kitchen. And all I could think of years later when I recapped the story and even revisited the story with her in time was that, you know, Mom, hey, I shot the kitchen floor, but I did not shoot the kitchen sink. And those of you who are old enough to know the song, I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot the deputy, would get that song, would get my reference. But that's true, that really did happen. I shot the kitchen floor, but I did not shoot the kitchen sink. Well, that's some of my memories and one of my stories I wanted to share with you all today here on the Coffee Break. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit the subscribe and notification bell and share it with all your friends if you're so inclined. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time right here on the Coffee Break. Until then, have a great day. Bye.